Good evening, Miami alumni and friends, and welcome to our special presentation tonight, Recent Grads in the Classroom, Miami Presents. We are excited to be joined by two of our honorees for 18 of the Last 9 awards, which are our annual Young Alumni Awards. And we're kicking off the week in a virtual fashion with those honorees who I'll have introduced very shortly. A couple quick housekeeping things. If you do want to ask live questions, we're going to have live Q&A at the end. There's an ask a question button right below your video feed, and we'd love to hear from you. We do have some questions submitted in advance that we'll share, so thank you for sharing those. And we also would like to invite you to check out our other webinars on our webinar site, which I will share the address after. And I think that covers it for our acknowledgements. I'd like to introduce Dr. Tammy Schwartz. Tammy is the director of the Urban Teaching Cohort, and it's a community-based approach to teacher education where faculty and students collaborate with high-need schools and community-based organizations to prepare teachers who are grounded in the life of the community. And Tammy's just an awesome ambassador for Miami, and I'm so glad that she's going to help host this with two of our current students in the education department. So I will pass it off to all of you, and
Great.
Thanks so much for being with us.
Great, thank you, JJ, and welcome everyone. It's great to have you all with us, even though I can't see you. I'm just going to feel your presence here tonight. As JJ said, I'm the director of what used to be the Urban Teaching Cohort, but is now the Interdisciplinary Urban Cohort. And I'd like to introduce two of my co-moderators who are helping out this evening. First is Alexandra Groth. Alexandra is a student in the Urban Cohort, and I've had the opportunity to work with Alexandra directly through some of her work that she's done with us and youth at one of our partner schools, Euler Community School in Lower Price Hill. And Anna Page. Anna Page is also one of our Urban Cohort students, and I have the good fortune of working with her in our junior seminar course. Anna is also one of our NOICE scholars, preparing to be a STEM teacher through our Urban Cohort. And I'd like to recognize them both as folks who have taken on leadership in our student organization, Urban Leaders. So thanks to Alexandra Groth and Anna Page for joining us tonight. And now I'd like to turn it over to Alexandra and Anna, and they will each introduce one of our panelists. And we'll begin with Alexandra's introduction.
Hi. So first we have Alyssa Marcangelo joining us tonight. She's a graduate of the class of 2012, and she teaches French at Emerson School, which is a private K-12 school in Ann Arbor, Michigan. One of her main focuses in the classroom is incorporating technology such as virtual reality or Google Earth to engage her students.
Thank you. Welcome, Alyssa. And Anna, next, if you'll introduce our next special guest this evening.
Of course. And we would also like to welcome Andrea Spinney, who is a graduate of the class of 2015. Andrea is an English teacher at Woodward Career Technical High School in Cincinnati Public Schools. In her classroom, she focuses on how social justice issues affect the lives of her students and how they can take action against those systems of oppression. Andrea also partners with the Urban Cohort here at Miami University and conducts youth participatory action research with her students and Miami undergraduates. And she also recently graduated in the spring with her master's degree in transformative education.
Thank you. Welcome, Andrea and Alyssa. So we're going to ask a series of questions this evening, and then after that, as JJ said, we'll have some time to take questions from the audience. But I get to have the first question. So here you both are, out of your time at Miami, at least your undergraduate time at Miami, for a while now, and you've been in this career of teaching. So I know we often think about this when we're in our classes at Miami, and sometimes professors will ask students, so why do you want to become a teacher? And that answer might have been something when you were beginning a program at Miami University in your licensure area. But I'm going to ask you now, sometime later, why is it that you decided to why is it that you wanted to become a teacher? And to start us off, let's begin with you, Andrea, and we'll follow by Alyssa.
This is like the question that's like always asked, right? In your first like education classes. For me, I feel like my answer is a little bit different. And growing up, I did not have any, like, I wouldn't say I had horrible teachers, but I didn't really have any teachers that I really connected with, or I felt like kind of prepared me for life or taught me how to think. So when I started at Miami, I started at Miami Hamilton, and my classes were so diverse and I learned so much. And in my freshman year at Miami, I realized that like I had learned more during that time than my entire time in middle school, high school, which is pretty sad. But I was like, I don't want to be that teacher, right? So then kind of the flip side of it is I also was very interested in crime growing up. And then in high school kind of did some research exploration around the intersection between crime and education, and realized that really affects our kids growing up in urban areas. So that's kind of why I landed where I am. And I love it. So.
Thank you, Andrea. Alyssa, why did you become a teacher?
This is like exactly what Andrea said. This is the biggest question that teachers get asked all the time. I knew from a very young age that I always wanted to be a teacher. I love learning. And the thing that I love most about teaching is getting students excited about learning new things. And that's one of the things that I enjoy most about teaching. I also had some really amazing teachers that helped me through incredibly difficult times in my life. And the way that those teachers made me feel, just solidified the fact that teaching is what I meant to do.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'll take the next question. So I'm a senior here at Miami, and just like many students watching, I'm very excited, but also a little bit nervous for my first year of teaching next year. It's coming up pretty quick. I was wondering what your guys' throughout your first year of teaching, your biggest struggles or surprises or successes were. And we can start with Alyssa and then go to Andrea.
Okay. So my first year of teaching, I started in a private school, and I had never had any experience in a private school before. So it was a little bit of culture shock for me that first year. Just getting to know how a private school operates and the parent culture. So that was definitely a big hurdle for me that first year. I remember feeling super excited and nervous too. I think, sorry, it was like, it feels like a long time ago, but also yesterday at the same time. Would you mind? Could you repeat the question? I'm so sorry.
No worries. Yeah, so just throughout your first year of teaching, what would you say some of your biggest struggles or surprises or successes were?
I think just getting used to the culture of a new school and finding out how everything works was definitely one of my biggest struggles. I remember having a couple tough parent communication interactions, and that was definitely definitely a learning experience for me. Just learning not to take things so personally and seeing, tough parent interactions like that as an opportunity to grow and develop that strong homeschool connection.
Thank you. What about you, Andrea?
So your first year is like crazy in so many different ways, but in so many good ways. I think my biggest piece of advice would be to find people within your building. And even though you're like the new person and you'll be treated like the new person all year, seek those people out, even if it's uncomfortable for you, to learn how to build relationships with kids and learn how to not stress about your lesson plans. I'm currently in my 6th year of teaching, and I've taught at the same high school my entire career. And I look back at my first year, and there's so many things that are like so embarrassing. But like we all go through it. Like if you did your student teaching, if you're investing, yourself in the community, like you will be fine. And I think that would be one of the biggest things as well, is immerse yourself in the community in which you teach. Find out as much as you can about your school, about your students, about the culture of that building before you walk into that building, but then don't walk in like you know it all. And just learn as much as you can from your students, whether they're first graders, fifth graders, or 12th graders. They have a ton to teach you. And I learn a lot every day. So that would be, I don't know, I guess some of my successes, and not going into detail about my embarrassment downfalls, but.
Thank you.
All right, so kind of building off of Alexandra's question, in your respective 6 and 8 years of being a teacher, I'm sure that your experiences now look different than when you were a first-year teacher. So throughout the years, how have you grown and what have you learned? And Andrea, if you'd like to start.
These are like the best and most loaded questions. I think I've definitely grown and learned over the years in just so many different ways as a teacher and as a human being, just learning more about the students we serve. Again, no matter what type of school or what grade you teach in, but really valuing and believing that your students have something to teach you. And I think that's something that I put more emphasis on every year, even though I feel like I started that as well, because that's kind of how the urban cohort at Miami prepared me to be, even though I don't really think you could be prepared for your first day or first year of teaching or ever. But to definitely go out of your comfort zone. I think now I am like, I'm trying to figure out how to put this into words. Like, I've become more not afraid to do what I want to do in my classroom, to say what I want to say, and to teach what I want to teach. Because if you're in a district that has a union, you got things you have to do, but you have to figure out how to push those boundaries as well, to give your students what they need and not what the state of Ohio says they need, right? And I think that's something that I've become better at and learned to navigate better throughout these last few years.
Okay, thank you. And Alyssa, would you like to share?
Yeah, I definitely like to echo what Andrea said about, becoming more comfortable, seeking opportunities to kind of follow what you feel is right in your classroom. I think that the past couple years, I've definitely grown as a risk taker in my classroom and finding opportunities to, do what's right for the students. I also, one thing that I'm definitely trying to get better at every year is a work-life balance. Don't know if that's ever going to happen, but that's definitely something that, especially now in this crazy year, I'm trying to navigate what self-care as a teacher looks like.
Thank you, both of you. And I'm actually, Alexandra and Anna, you're going to see I'm going to go off script just a little bit here. So a couple of things. The question that we have is, how have you challenged yourself to grow in your profession? And, you both have alluded to some things that you're trying. So I'm going to ask if you could talk specifically, I think, Alyssa, you bringing up this work-life balance. I remember that throughout my entire K-12 teaching career. And specifically, you said you're trying to practice this self-care and work-life balance. Could you be specific, and would you be willing to share, what specifically are you doing in order to address that? What are some things that you feel like, pre-service teachers who are going to move into this profession, and hopefully by the time they get into the classroom, it won't be as crazy as it is now, but we're certainly going to have lessons that we take from this, and it's going to change the nature of school. And, I believe that at the heart of teaching is we teach who we are. We teach how we are. So I'm intrigued by what you said. And then, Andrew, if you want to follow up a little bit with that too, because I know you and I have talked offline about that a couple of times. And I think this is an important issue. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned that, Alyssa. Would you mind being specific for us?
Sure. So I remember when I started teaching, I was so excited to get into the classroom that, I was there on weekends. I was there till it was dark outside. And especially now with, teaching remotely and coming in person, and it's just so different for the kids. They can't interact in a way that's, kids are used to interacting. I find that teachers are spending so much time trying to figure out how to create amazing lessons and unique experiences for the kids. And I just think it's really important to try and take time for yourself, because we're so worried about taking care of the students and making sure the students are feeling okay. So a couple of things that I'm doing for myself this year, I'm giving myself a hard cutoff time every night for stopping responding to emails and, closing the computer, taking a break from my screen. I've recognized that I'm never going to feel like my work is done and like I've done and at the end of every day. And so I'm just trying to learn how to, accept that feeling is normal and it's okay. And now I need to spend some time with my family. I need to, maybe put a face mask on, do something that'll help me de-stress from, teaching, if that makes sense.
So I hear you saying this hard stop, like each night, and what's done is done, and you'll get back at it tomorrow, kind of attitude. Is that what we're hearing?
Yeah, and I don't stick to that every night, but I try, most nights.
I think even pre-service teachers hearing that, even with your plan to try to like do that, you're not perfect, and being okay with that. I think we all need to hear that, right? Every day is a new start and a new way to figure out how do we do this, particularly how do we do this teaching profession pre-COVID times, but even in these times right now. So I just want to encourage the listeners, particularly our students out there, to hear that you don't have to be perfect every single day, and you can take time for you. Andrea, do you have any words of wisdom about that, or any specific things that you've come to know and practice in this?
I don't know about words of wisdom, but especially definitely you have to stop at some point. But I've never, I really hope the undergrad students that are watching right now that COVID is not a thing. The world is back to normal when you guys get out, because I thought during college, I thought during my master's, I thought for the last 5 years that I've taught that I'm working all the time. This year has shown me what I thought was tons and tons and tons of work is nothing compared to what this virtual kind of COVID pandemic environment is. And it's made me reflect more on how I typically am, within a normal year. Because I'm somebody who I don't view my job as my job, even though it's my paycheck. I feel like I'm somebody who is working 24/7, but work isn't always a bad thing to me. I'm invested in the community. I'm invested in different, activism type things here in Cincinnati. And that's what I enjoy doing. But at the same time, that's not everything. And I think one of the things that I do, today, I did this with my students, is being real and being honest with your kids. I don't believe in the whole fake it till you make it mentality. If I'm having a rough day, I straight up tell my kids, I'm having a rough day, and we're going to make it through it. It's not going to affect how I do my job or what we do in class. Just I, tell them, communicate with me. I don't need to know your whole life story, but just stay in communication with me, and just having expectations around grading and points and all of that is a whole other conversation. But just knowing the expectations you have for your students, and then what you as a teacher can kind of handle. If you're not providing effective feedback to your students, but you're just giving them busy work to have a number in a grade book, that doesn't make any sense for you or for the children. So I don't know. That's what I've been contemplating more this year, is what I'm doing, is it effective, and why, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So kind of to follow up on that, that question about, growing, you talked about growing in this ways, both of you have setting boundaries and trying to be real, and not trying, but being real with your students. I kind of on the other side of that, kind of from a professional development perspective, I know early in my career, I got involved with the National Writing Project, and it was a way for me to deepen my understanding of my profession as an English teacher, and even my own identity as a writer, have there been professional development opportunities or activities that you've engaged in that have helped you further the way that you think about your profession, yourself in the profession, your classroom, or your students? And we'll start with Alyssa.
So just to share a really positive professional development experience.
Sure.
Okay. One opportunity that I had that I absolutely loved, and I think this would be valuable for anybody, no matter what grade level or subject you're teaching, is the Center for Transformative Teaching and Learning in Washington, D.C. They it's totally changed my perspective on how I teach, because they look at the science of teaching and how the brain works. So they give you really great strategies based on brain science of how to, teach anything to your students and what will help them absorb information the best and make connections. That was a really great professional development experience, and they connect you with other teachers that have gone through that program and support you throughout the year. So that was a really great professional development experience that really helped me be more reflective and intentional about my teaching practices.
And have you noticed a difference in your students' responses because you've changed the way you're doing things?
A little bit, yeah. When I was teaching French last year, and I was doing more of these like neuro strategies for vocabulary recall, I noticed that when I implemented what I learned at the CTTL, I definitely saw a difference in my students' response and how they absorbed information and how they demonstrated their knowledge. So that was it was just a really great experience. I recommend that everybody look it up.
Thank you. Andrea?
I consider this professional development. I don't know if the system considers it professional development. But one thing I do is I volunteer at our local juvenile detention center here in Cincinnati. I run a group there called Student Voices, and basically what we do is the kids and I get to talk about just school and communication in school, and kind of the overall goal is for the students who are getting out, when they transition back, into a normal environment, they have, better communication skills and kind of think through things a little bit better. But all the kids there are, live or go to school. I would say most of them live or go to school, somewhere in Hamilton County. And just hearing their perspective on what makes a good teacher, what makes a bad teacher, why do security guards do this? I had this interaction with the football coach or the principal, and just learning from them and having these deep conversations and doing writing reflections that I love to do in my classroom, at school, but I can only do to an extent because I have 30 kids in there. That's what really I love it. It calms me down and teaches me so much. So that's what I consider my PD. That's useful.
Thank you both. I just to our students who are listening in tonight, I think it's important to think of us as lifelong learners. It doesn't stop when you leave Miami, that we're continuing this learning about ourselves personally and professionally over our lifetime. So thanks for sharing how you're doing that, both personally and professionally, in a relatively early part of your career.
Tammy, can I add something to that? Is
Absolutely, that okay? Alyssa, yeah.
It's I'm not huge into social media, but some of my favorite informal PD is from Instagram and Twitter. I love kind of using Instagram as a way to wind down at the end of the day, and I follow so many great teachers, and I've gotten so many amazing book recommendations, technology tips, and just extra activities and resources from looking through social media. And I've been able to use Twitter to connect with really great educators from around the world. I'm not really big into Twitter. I'm working at getting better at it, but social media has been a really great PD resource for me as well. And that's something that I didn't really utilize when I was in college, because it wasn't as big of a thing then in some ways, but I've gotten so many great tips from social media PD.
Thank you.
Those are all really cool, guys. So, a different question. We've talked a little bit about how you build relationships with your students and who you are as teachers. How do you think your students would describe you as a teacher, or how your colleagues would describe you? Alyssa, do you want to take that one first?
This is a hard question for me to answer because I would like to think that my colleagues think that I'm helpful and kind. I think that as a teacher, one of the most important things when you go into a school to think about is not only building up your students, but building up the people that you work with as well. So I like to try to find different ways to support my colleagues and make them feel, recognize their strengths. Sorry, I'm really tired. Apparently I can't talk. Teachers too. So I hope that they would describe me as someone who's uplifting and helpful. When you're teaching first grade, I think you have to be goofy a little bit silly and fun to a certain extent. So I think that my students would describe me as somebody who's fun and kind and supportive. It's really hard to answer a question about what other people think about you or how they would describe you.
No, you've got a great answer. Thank you. What about you, Andrea?
So one of the things I've done, well, not this year because of COVID, but the last couple of years after I had been in my school for a few years, for like one of the first day activities, I like do these like post-it note like prompts with different questions. And one of the questions that I ask is like, what have you heard about me? Or like, how have you heard other students describe me? And they are hilarious because then we go through each post-it note and like, I talk about like, oh yeah, this is true. Or like, this is definitely not true at all. But I think my students hopefully would describe me as somebody who is very authentic. I am very real. I don't sugarcoat anything. Some students, I have to give my spiel at the beginning of the year, like it's completely out of love and respect. And like, if you're somebody who like doesn't like just straight to the point, kind of blunt people, like we'll work through it. But that's how I am. I'm somebody who, like I don't play, like I'm super goofy. We have a lot of fun in my class, but at the same time, I have really high expectations for my students and I help them achieve those expectations because I believe a lot of my kids have just been passed along in a system like I did and didn't realize I wasn't learning anything throughout school. So just, yeah. And then how my peers, like other staff would describe me, probably just like doing too much sometimes, like hopefully in a good way. I'm like always trying to like help out, be a leader in any way I can, be very collaborative. Yeah, but just doing too much probably.
Thank you both. So I have this next question. You are each now working in different contexts. Andrea is working in a big urban school district in Cincinnati, and Alyssa is working at a private school in Ann Arbor, Michigan. When you are moving through your coursework at Miami University, hopefully we're preparing you to take to build a philosophy and to enact that philosophy of teaching within your own classrooms. And depending upon where you land up in teaching, living out your values as a teacher can be challenging or not. How have you each navigated living out your values as a teacher in the systems of education where you find yourselves? Potentially it's been easy, potentially it's been challenging. And and what do you value? What is important to you? Why do you get up and do this every day? So let's start with Andrea on that one.
It's a lot.
For me, is at the heart of like why we do and why we keep getting back in there. So sorry, go ahead. I just get excited.
So for me, I'm like a white woman. I teach in a predominantly Black school. I don't believe my school, my district, any district in Ohio or this country was set up and built and created to serve my students. And that's why I do what I do every day, to dismantle the everything within these systems, whether it's our criminal justice system, healthcare, whatever, that wasn't built for people who don't look like me. And I feel like I have a duty and a responsibility to continue to better understand myself as a human being, and acknowledge kind of my identity and my privilege to make a positive change in our world, not because I'm some like white savior, but because I feel like I can't do anything different. I think that's one thing I really remind myself of every day, and my kids remind me, like our kids, whether they're in first grade or whether they're in 10th grade, no matter if they, come from a $1 billion family or, from poverty, they don't need saving. Like they don't need help. They don't need fixing. They need like adults to care and to believe in them and to believe that they have something to teach me as their teacher and to, teach the world. And I guess that's what keeps me going, is knowing that every day I can roll out of bed and I have a chance to hopefully have some kid have a light bulb go off and say like, wow, I do have something good in me, despite, being raised in a system that continues to just kick me out of class or, call home, suspend me, et cetera, et cetera. And I think for me, being at the high school level, so I teach 10th and 11th grade. They only have a year, 2, 3 years left. So it's like, if I'm not being the best educator and person that I can be to hopefully get, 5 seconds of something through their brain, then like, what if they don't have anybody else? And I don't say that to like put myself on a pedestal, but I think there's too many teachers in this country who should not be teachers. And just like, I don't know, did that answer your question?
I think it answered part of it. It's definitely about what you value and why you're doing this work again. I think if you could think for a minute, and I'll come back to you in just a minute, but about, how do you live that out with the mandates that you're faced with on a daily basis? So maybe Andrea, think about that. And Alyssa, what do you value in the work that you do? What is it that's at the heart and the core of why you do this, why you're still in this after 8 years?
These are all like the biggest questions. My primary goal when I wake up every day, I go to school wanting to make sure that all my students feel valued, believed in, cared for, and successful. I work with the little ones in first grade, and I think that, at that age, so many things that they're learning, so many concepts and skills are brand new to them. And it can be kind of scary to be a risk taker when you're that age. And, in some instances, like I'm going to use reading for an example, because I'm working with a little one right now who's a little bit afraid to read. If a student feels like they're not good at something, if they feel like there's something that they can't do, that impression that self-image, the concept that they have of themselves, can have a negative impact on them for quite a long time moving forward in their educational experience. So I like to try to find opportunities to make sure that students know that they can do it and find ways to help build students' confidence. And I want everyone to leave, on a positive note at the end of the day, feeling like they were successful at something and they can come back and, be a risk taker and know that they're in a safe environment where they're cared for. I think working in a private school, having more autonomy in what you do makes living out my values as a teacher a little bit easier. I remember in my student teaching experience, it was amazing. I still remember all the names of every student in my first kindergarten class for my student teaching experience, and I think about it all the time. But I remember everything being so focused on standards, and standards are very important, but in a private school, I found that I have a little bit more freedom and autonomy to maybe do things a little bit differently and more creatively in a way that I feel like can reach the passions and needs and skills of all my students, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense. And Thank you for you got in both of those answers, Alyssa. So, Andrea, we're going to flip back over to you. So, how do you navigate that with the mandates that you're seeing, and how do you can you live out your values, and what does that look like for you as a teacher?
You definitely can. It's extremely hard in a system. And again, this is not like about my school or district, but just like school in general in this country that is built to control, right? And we're built to control students and to control teachers. Like teachers are so not respected in this country. And again, not that like I need that, but especially in this COVID environment, just seeing how nationally like districts have responded and treated teachers for new asks or requests of us in this environment, because we're just teachers, right? We can do anything and we can change our lesson plans 28,000 times, and like who cares, when like that's not healthy for us or for our students. But I think one thing that like wasn't talked about a lot in undergrad is this idea of how to navigate a system that you don't agree with 100%. Like obviously we can't just like tear down school, wake up tomorrow and have, you know, the perfect like utopian, you know, school that we all hope for one day. But I guess if you are in a public school, read those papers, read your contracts, go to those PDs and pay attention, because again, the system relies on us being ignorant and not paying attention and not finding the loopholes and not finding the fine print. And I would like to think I'm somewhat good at that now. I'm learning. There's been crazy stuff that has happened recently to like be more savvy and sophisticated in this fight, right? But just because you have a job doesn't mean you can't push back, because at the end of the day, you're pushing back for your students. You're not pushing back for your ego. You're not pushing back for an award. You're pushing back for your students. And like, if you have a union, like learn about that. We don't learn about you. I feel like I was so ignorant going into my first year. I'm like, oh, I got to do this. I have to do this question. I have to do this 3 times a week. But like, no, you don't. It's just like most districts, you know, certain things are required, but then there are certain things that are just highly suggested. And if you can back up what you do in your classroom with research, evidence-based strategies, like you're good to go. So just do that kind of extra legwork to cover yourself, to be able to have, you know, that autonomy in your classroom that you want.
Thank you. Thank you both for that dialogue.
All right, so I'll take the next question. So I think that this year has been just incredibly unique for everyone here, and it's been filled with just so many highs and lows. So can you both just please share with us some special challenges and some joys that you've had teaching this year, especially in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic and also to the racial injustices and unrest happening in our country? And Alyssa, if you'd like to start.
Oh man.
I know, loaded question again.
There's so many parts to that question, and unique for this year is a very gentle way of putting it. Yeah. It's been okay. So I just started in-person teaching this week. Today was my second day, and the kids were almost shell-shocked when they came back. I mean, you could hear a pin drop when all the kids sat down in the classroom yesterday. It was the energy and vibe in the room was so unusual. It was unlike any other first day of school I've ever had. And I mean, I can't even quite put it into words. It's just, it was really unusual. And figuring out this year how students can have joyful interactions with their friends where they feel close to their peers while staying at a distance has definitely been a huge challenge, especially with the younger grades where they have to, technology is a great tool to kind of facilitate those connections, but the technology is so new to those young learners that it's just a lot for them to handle. but you catch those moments where they're out at recess or they're having snack, and it feels like, you know, a normal year a little bit. Yesterday, we ended our day with a rose and a thorn, something that was really beautiful and happy about our day, and something that we wish was a little different. And almost all of the students said that they were just so happy to be at school. And that was a really joyful moment, even though it's so different and unusual. You can definitely tell, I know you mentioned the racial injustice that's been a lot more prevalent and at the forefront of everyone's minds. And I feel very grateful now that schools are taking that, you know, into more consideration and being more intentional about the PD opportunities that they provide. And you can tell that that's been at the forefront of a lot of students' minds. And I know that I've been trying, and we just started school, but I'm thinking about how to approach that in my curriculum this year, and making sure that, you know, everybody's represented. Not only is everybody represented, but everybody's able to be, this is such a big question. Like, you could talk for an hour about this, and I don't want to take up a lot of time. I feel like I'm starting to ramble, but it's definitely a topic that we're talking about in our classroom, and making sure that, I like to use the term windows and doors. So we students are able to see themselves in the curriculum and activities that they do, and see others represented, and be exposed to, you know, different. I'm not answering this question as nicely as I want to, but I hope you understand like where I'm going with this.
I think we do, and also too, you all are probably really tired with all you've been navigating lately. So definitely know that you're in a room, a virtual room of love. So no judgment.
Okay, thank you. I feel like even when I'm teaching, I feel like right now, this week, I can't even form coherent sentences. So,
yep. Andrea was talking about being real with her students. You're being real with us, Alyssa, and that's okay.
For real.
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, so if you'll just share some of the special challenges or joys that you've had throughout the year related to, I mean, either or both the COVID-19 pandemic or the racial injustices in our country.
So I think one of my greatest joys, which is also not in the big picture, is being virtual for my students who, you know, were able to be virtual and succeeded in that environment, or at least, you know, got through it. And we're still that way. So right now the kids are only coming to our school 2 days a week, and then they're virtual the other 3 days. But it has allowed so much more time for like small group one-on-one conversations, because you don't have 30 bodies in a room with 30 different personalities, and, you know, trying to get to know everybody and so forth. And I think I've probably had some of the best, like, deepest, just most beautiful conversations I've ever had in my teaching career this year because of that, because I'm able to hop on a Google Meet real quick and talk with the kid for 10 minutes with like no distractions, right? But yet at the same time, while I'm having those conversations, in the back of my mind, I'm like, but like, this isn't how school is set up. Like I'm coming, I have over 130, I think I have 131 kids that are on my roster right now. And you can't have those conversations that you need to have and provide the support you need to provide to your students in a normal, you know, environment. So I think it's just reiterated for me that continued like fight of like, hopefully one day schooling in this country will look different, because that's been one great thing from this. I think the challenge, that's also a challenge, but also just like so many of our kids, like, where are they and what are they doing? And are they okay? Pretty much all of my kids in my school, you know, have grown up in poverty, currently live in poverty. We have a high population of students experiencing homelessness, in foster care, just a variety of like challenging situations, but situations that also provide so much knowledge, right? And so much, I'm really sorry if you guys can hear my dog. But I think that's been my biggest challenge and the students' biggest challenge, because we returned to school last week. So this is my second week with the kids. And we're having kids show up who we didn't see them at all during the virtual environment, or they would, log in once every 2 weeks. And it's like, but why though? And just, again, always having in the back of my mind, like, how long is this going to last? And how can we support these students, especially students who are having to deal with everything they're seeing on the news, and on social media in regards to, this racial injustice that we've had in our country for years and years and years and years, in addition to living in neighborhoods in which they're hearing and witnessing and experiencing, violence on a daily or weekly basis. And how do we make sure these kids are okay? And I think that's where it gets back to, like, figuring out the system, because I don't care about tests right now. I don't care about grades right now, yet I have to care because that's what the people above me say I have to care about. But like today in class, our questions for this quarter are pretty powerful, talking about what is freedom, what is power, what is happiness, who has power, what does justice mean? So today in class, I only had 3 students show up for one of these. So we're still working on attendance and buses. This whole transition is just crazy. So one of my bells, we only had 3 students. And we were talking about, I forget what the question even was. This idea of like physical freedom versus mental freedom. And one of the students was somehow, like, gun violence got brought up. And gun violence in Cincinnati this year has been crazy. And I have a lot of students who have lost family members or friends of friends to gun violence. And we had this whole conversation about just like retaliation and like these younger generations who are out in the street, like what makes a kid choose to make that choice? Is it a choice? Like, how do we stop this from happening? Can we stop this from happening? And like, that's a conversation that I could tell that child needed to have because of the look on their face. And I was able to do that because I had 3 kids in the room. And those are the conversations that we need to be having every day with students. And hopefully, again, we'll see that change in the system, at some point. So.
Thank you both. I'm noticing we're coming up on 47 minutes here, and we had a few more questions, but Alexandra and Anna, maybe we should remind everyone that you can post a question and we can take some of those questions. We'll start with that. If for some reason we don't get any questions, we'll come back to the questions that we still have. Sound good, Anna and Alexandra?
Yeah, sounds great.
For our viewers, our participants to chime in here. JJ, any special instructions for them?
No, the ask a question button's right below the video. We'll still take more. We already have a few in. If you don't mind, I'll hit you with a couple of those. All right, so a few of the students, I believe, listening want to know how hard it was to find a job, and I suppose along with that, any advice you have for someone looking for a teaching job in the near future. Let's start with Alyssa on this one.
I'm so sorry. My dog was barking and it was really crazy, so I was muted. I'm sorry. Again, super tired. So when I graduated, it was really hard for me to find a job. I was looking for a classroom position, just K through 3. And I remember it was incredibly hard. I couldn't find the right job for me. I had a few long-term sub positions come up, but that was really hard for me. It was my first day of school that I wasn't in a classroom, and it was a really sad day for me. But I knew it wasn't going to be forever, and I found a teaching job in October. So I think it's important to know if you don't have a job at the first day of school, things are always changing, especially now in the COVID, time of COVID. So if you don't find a classroom job or the right job that you're looking for by the first day of school, don't give up. Because I remember I was totally ready to throw in the towel, and in October, everything ended up working out just fine. If you're looking for a job now, I would definitely over prepare materials to share. Definitely try to maybe have a couple of virtual lessons in your back pocket, because I know right now our school was hiring, and the one question that we asked everybody was, how would you assess, how would you collaborate, and how would you present a certain concept in a virtual environment? So even if COVID is not quite a thing, which hopefully it's not by the time you're out looking for a job, I would kind of think about how you would answer those questions and maybe have a couple examples prepared to show. Because when you definitely have a solid example, I think that leaves a really great impression on schools, so they can see how you would do it instead of just hear maybe how you would.
Thank you. And Andrea, same question to you. Advice for getting a job?
Yeah, so for me, I knew I wanted to teach in Cincinnati Public. I had done my student teaching in Cincinnati Public. It wasn't necessarily hard to find a job, but you need to put in that work. So as Alyssa said, be as prepared as you can. Please do your research on the school. So I am our English Language Arts Department chair. So when we have open positions and we have to interview, you would think common sense is a thing for most people, but as we all know, in many different areas of life, it is not. So if you're going into a school, read their website, look at their report card, drive around the community beforehand. One of the things I did before I interviewed is we have local recreation centers in most of our neighborhoods in Cincinnati. So I called them and said, is there anybody here who can tell me a little bit about Bond Hill? And I went and literally ended up speaking with this woman for 2 hours, who is now kind of one of these people I look up to. I ended up working at the rec center, and just having that kind of community-based information before going into that interview kind of sets you aside, from other applicants as well.
Awesome, thank you. I'm just gonna add one more, and then Alexandra and Anna, if you have one more left that you want, maybe that'll get us to 8 here, and we want to end on time before everyone falls asleep. Thank you so much for your time at this busy time. But okay, so the other question I got was building relationships during virtual learning. Andrea, you talked a little bit about it with having those Zoom calls, but got a couple questions about building those relationships. Some people are still virtual. And when you're not seeing them on a daily basis, how do you build relationships with your kids? Let's start with Andrea on that one, please.
So being English makes it a little bit easier, I think, just because we write and talk and listen, to things all day. But I would also argue, you can incorporate writing into any subject. I need to give a shout out, none of you probably know her, but Christy Jacobs, she was also in the urban cohort. She teaches math in my district, and she's amazing. Social justice, community-based, really cares and builds solid relationships with her kids. And I'm sitting there you teach math though, but it's incredible. So just figuring out how to be creative with incorporating those kind of get to know you, relationship building activities within whatever subject you teach. And then I would also argue just continuing to be real and show your human side to your students. So if you're asking, I never ask my kids to write about something if I'm not willing to share the same thing. So just continuing to do that as well.
For me, for building relationships in a virtual setting, I try to make sure I have one-on-one time with my students, whether that be through a lunch with me, and then we just get to talk and get to know each other a little bit, or doing a small group lunch so the students can socialize with each other as well. Me and my peers at school, we offer our students peer time on Zoom when we were remote, so they have time to show each other, I don't know, a cool new toy, or just read each other a book. So it's important, I think, to try and find times for students to connect socially on Zoom, and maybe find ways to have a tangible connection in this virtual setting. So I remember last year in some classes, we would send like friendship bracelets that they could all wear to Zoom, or have different fun dress up days on Zoom. And that was really fun. And this year with my first graders, we're doing a pen pal project virtually, but you could always do snail mail too. It's always fun for students to get a little something in the mail.
Well, thank you. We just have one final question as we wrap up the night. Most of our viewers here tonight are students, and we were wondering if you have any final advice for students moving through their coursework at Miami or even into their future careers. Andrea, if you want to go first.
Continue to seek out the things that make you uncomfortable. Read about things that you don't know about. Well, I guess if COVID wasn't a thing, surround yourself with people that aren't like you, and take in as much difference in a positive way that you can before you are in the classroom full time. And again, no matter if you're teaching rural, suburban, private, public, urban, wherever, we as teachers hold, I think, more power than I think I do, right? And as a system we do, because when we're talking about some of the issues that are happening and have been happening in our country right now, it doesn't matter who you teach. At the end of the day, we're all human beings and we all have a duty to make our world a better place. And if you don't think that, if you think my job is just to teach math, we shouldn't be here. And that's my one big piece of advice too. I work in a building where we have Teach for America folks. We have folks who come in and then they realize oh, this is what it is, and leave. Please, if you get in, this is not meant to be depressing, but if you get out there and you realize teaching is not for you, again, whether it's kindergartners or high schoolers, it's okay to leave. I hate seeing teachers all across the country hate their own lives because they hate their job, and then you're making students' lives miserable. I don't know if that answers the question, but that would be my, it's okay. We want amazing teachers, but if it's not for, it's okay. So.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Alyssa, do you have any final advice?
I want to echo what Andrea said and never stop seeking opportunities to learn or do things that maybe you wouldn't think about doing or be comfortable with doing. Try and, go out of the your comfort zone a little bit. I remember I was always a little bit nervous when I was in my field experiences and in my student teaching in undergrad about making a mistake. But I know, Tammy, you said earlier that every day is a brand new day. And to not beat yourself up if something doesn't go the way that you planned, or if you make a mistake or do something embarrassing, because I know I've done a lot of that. So to always just remember every day is a brand new day, and it's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to be nervous. If there's something that you're really excited about, just go for it. And always, I think every year it's important to remind yourself to shake it up a little bit and try new things to keep your passion for teaching fresh in the forefront of your mind.
Every day is a new day. I did a lot of stupid things, and I could always give myself permission to start the reset button. I can pretend it's the first day of school. We're starting over, people. Yeah, well, it is now 8 o'clock, and we're ending exactly on time, which is awesome because I know Andrea and Alyssa, you have a job to get up and do again tomorrow. And on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you both for sharing your experiences with us this evening. And Alexandra and Anna, thank you very much for co-moderating this session. And a special shout out to the alumni office for hosting this 1809 of 9 recognition every year. And congratulations, Alyssa and Andrea, for both being recognized. JJ, any final words?
Oh, I think you nailed it. One more congratulations and round of applause for Alyssa and Andrea. It's awesome. We appreciate teachers so much, and happy to recognize you. And I want to point out that out of all the 18 of the last 9, there's 18 people, obviously, from the last 9 years that are being honored. The teachers have the first web event, so we got it done first. So thank you for being a part of that, and thank you so much for your time. Very briefly, I wanted to mention that the rest of our webinars are on our webinar site, which I'll throw up the address there. We have a bunch of really cool stuff coming up. Congresswoman Susan Brooks this week, Equal Justice Initiative this week. If you're looking to social justice issues, we have a few things coming up in November, including all the Black ASG presidents, and then a presentation from alumni that are executives in diversity, inclusion space. So we hope you'll check those out. And other than that, thank you one last time. We appreciate the viewers. We appreciate our participants. Awesome job, everybody. And Andrea has her hand up for a final comment.
Sorry, I hate raising my hand, but I don't know how to do this. I just want to say, if there's anybody like current students that are out there, I love doing this type of stuff. If you want to talk with me, if you have questions, you want to do a Google Meet, a Zoom, anything like that, like anything I can do to help alleviate some of the stress that's on your plate right now, especially those of you who are getting ready to graduate, feel free to send me an email, search me on Facebook. Like, I am more than happy and willing to have those conversations.
Absolutely. And if you're in the early childhood program and you're looking for fun ways to incorporate distance learning, or if you have it, if you need anything at all, I'm here for you 100%. So please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Thank you all, and everyone have a great night.